You're listening to the Balanced Educator Podcast, episode number 88. Welcome to the Balanced Educator. We're your hosts, Kaylee
and Josiane from EduCalm. Our intention is to equip and empower you to feel more calm, balanced, and joyful in all aspects of your life.
Hello there and welcome. We are so happy to share this time with you today. On today's episode, we've invited Dr. Ilana Nankin. She's an award-winning entrepreneur, teacher educator, and former pre-K teacher committed to using wellness as a vehicle for social change. Ilana is the founder and CEO of Breathe for Change, an organization on a mission to enhance the health and well-being of teachers, students, and entire school communities. Breathe for Change offers the world's only 200-hour wellness and yoga teacher training specifically for educators and leads self-care and social-emotional learning professional development for schools, districts, and organizations across the U.S. You guys are going to love this interview. Before we get into it, though, we want to share today's sponsor, Little Love Home. Little Love Home creates sustainable, minimalist goods for you in your home. Everything's handmade with love by a mom in Manitoba, Canada. I personally have a set of coasters and a ring dish from Little Love Home in my office that I absolutely love. I love the minimalist design, and it helps to keep my things organized. And when my office is organized, I feel calm. I love that everything in the Little Love Home online shop is made from high quality 100% cotton rope, and that they donate 5% of their net proceeds to Global Footprint Network. Check out the beautiful and timeless designs at www.littlelovehome.com and click on shop, then use the code EduCalm10 to get 10% off your first order. So again, go to littlelovehome.com, click on shop, and use the code EduCalm10. That's EduCalme 10 to get 10% off your first order. All right, let's get into today's interview. Hello, Ilana. Thank you so much for being on the Balanced Educator podcast.
Hello. I am so excited to be here today with you and just can't wait to share my story and to hear what unfolds together.
Awesome. Well, let's start right off the bat. What is your story? So what led you to where you are today?
Oh, I love that question. So I am a former pre-K teacher. I taught pre-K in San Francisco and absolutely loved my superstars. But when I was teaching, I was so stressed, so overwhelmed and overworked. And that's when I first found yoga. I came home crying one day and my roommate looked really blissed out and I was like, what's going on with you? And she was also a teacher. And she said, come to yoga with me. And I said, I don't do yoga. And then that happened a few times. And I finally decided to go to a class, and it just completely transformed my life and my well-being. And I ended up integrating so many of these wellness practices into my classroom with my kids and just saw extraordinary transformations in them, both social, emotionally, and academically. And I was like, there is something going on here that needs to be further explored. So then my California self went off to Madison, Wisconsin to pursue my PhD in curriculum and instruction at University of Wisconsin in Madison. And I became a teacher educator. And for my dissertation, I ended up following a bunch of teachers that I had taught for 2 years in the teacher ed program into diverse classrooms around the world to look specifically at how they were taking up their ideals of social justice and action in their teaching. And what I ended up finding was that across the board, these educators who went into the profession so inspired and ready to do it for life and invigorated were so stressed, so overwhelmed and burnt out, just like I was as a teacher, and just had no tools to take care of themselves, let alone meet the social emotional needs of their kids. And as I was seeing how universal the issue of teacher stress and burnout truly is through my dissertation, I simultaneously was still teaching courses at the university. And my students found out, who were teachers, they found out that I was a recently certified yoga teacher. And they thought it was amazing. So they rented out space in the student union to teach me this yoga class, or teach them this yoga class every week in addition to my 3-hour course. And what ended up happening was like day after day after day, one teacher after the next would come up to me and say things like, "Oh my gosh, Ilana, the kids who normally have anxiety attacks before tests are utilizing these practices and their test scores are increasing." Or the students who experience so much trauma in the home are learning how to breathe and everything is improving. It's like one thing after the next. And so I was like, nothing is going to stop me. I am starting a movement that's going to enhance the health and well-being of teachers first and foremost, but of course, students and entire school communities. And so I declared that I was going to run the world's only 200-hour wellness and yoga teacher training specifically for educators. And that was in January 2015. And I went and told every human being that I knew, like, I'm doing this thing. All educators, you have to come to Madison for this 200-hour, 16-day intensive training that's never existed before. And I somehow managed to recruit 34 amazing educators to our first training that summer. And then, honestly, the movement just exploded from there. So these teachers went back into their schools, into their communities. They started mindfulness initiatives, wellness programs, integrated social emotional learning into the classroom. We were seeing unbelievable results for students and for entire school communities. And then I brought people onto my team, and that next year we expanded to the Bay Area, New York City. Bay Area is home for me, so I wanted to bring it home. And then in New York, Sesame Workshop found out about us, so they thought it was amazing, and they hosted our training. So when the real Elmo and Big Bird walked into my training, I was like, okay, I'm on to something. We are on to something. Keep going. So we certified 185 teachers that second year through our 200-hour training, 600 educators the next year, 1,100 the next year. And then this year, we've certified even more. So we have a total of over 3,000 graduates who we call our wellness champions. So they receive 2 certifications. They receive their 200-hour Yoga Alliance official yoga teacher certification that's internationally recognized. And we're the only training in the world that does that certification specifically for educators. And then they also receive what we call our, it's like our special sauce. It's our Breathe for Change Wellness Champion certification. And that's what qualifies these educators as leaders of wellness and social emotional learning and yoga and mindfulness within the school and community context. So we teach them how to teach the practices in a trauma-informed and culturally responsive way for the diverse communities and students that they're serving. So it's been an amazing journey over the last 4.5 years. And it's, I started total grassroots, bottom up, went straight to the teachers, and the teachers have really built the movement. And it's, it was my vision originally, sure, but I really see it as a collective vision that continues to grow and develop. And now we're partnering with schools, districts, and organizations to provide self-care and social emotional learning professional development for educators all over the country. And the ripple effects are enormous. So yeah, that's really what takes us to today. And it's just I feel so grateful to, 1, be living into my purpose so wholeheartedly, but 2, to be surrounded by so many like-minded educators who are so passionate about using wellness as a vehicle for social change in their classrooms and their communities, and who actually recognize now the critical importance for us as educators to take care of ourselves first and foremost so that we can do the important work of taking care of our kids. So
that's amazing. Yeah. What a beautiful story. And it sounds like it's just catching like wildfire, which I think is so necessary. So we're seeing a rise in Canada, and I'm sure it's the same in the States, in difficulties in mental health in our students. It's really becoming a problem. Anxiety and depression is on the rise in students and really young kids as well. Now, I'd like to know, why did you decide to start with a yoga teacher training, an intensive like that takes a lot of time? How come you went that route instead of, creating resources just straight for the classroom, like YouTube videos or things like that? Why is it important to train the teacher?
This is like my favorite thing to talk about, because I honestly think that this is what sets us apart from other organizations that are doing the important work around social emotional learning and wellness. So SEL, social emotional learning, is a huge term that's being taken up, which is amazing. But from our lens, we tag on the S to SEL. So it spells out SELF, because we believe it's so important for the teacher to embody the social emotional learning practices that we want to instill in our students. Because if our teachers are stressed and overwhelmed, then how in the world are they supposed to teach kids how to be empathetic or compassionate or loving? And so I believe, the reason I started Breathe for Change with a focus on the teacher is because I honestly believe with all of my heart that the teacher, if they are taking care of themselves, then they're going to be able to teach the kids to do the same. And we have to, in order to create that school-wide, community-wide, long-term transformation, we can't just have a one-off curriculum that goes direct to the students and forget about the critical importance of the role of the teacher, because our teachers need to be embodying and modeling and living and breathing what it means to be an amazing human being, which is social emotional learning. And from that place, social emotional learning for students is totally possible. And so one of the things that I think is important to note around this topic is that, if you look at across our education system, the problems with teacher burnout, teacher stress, 73% of teachers report feeling extreme levels of stress every single day. And almost half 50% of teachers are leaving the classroom in the first 5 years. And there's a ton of different numbers and percentages around this data where you look at first-year teachers, third-year teachers, fifth-year teachers, and people are leaving because they're not taking care of themselves. And it's a stressful job. And so I truly believe that if we are developing our teachers as leaders of wellness in their communities and equipping them with tangible tools that they can teach their kids from a place of true embodiment, then we're onto something. Then the teacher is doing it, it's modified, differentiated for the kids, and then it becomes a part of the culture.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That is our huge thing here at the Balanced Educator podcast and at EduCom as well, is that we have to fill our cups first as educators. We tend to be the type of people that give, and love giving. And then all of a sudden we're burnt out and we have nothing left. So it has to be these practices that we're integrating into our own lives first. And like you said, so that we can model what being empathetic looks like. So we can model what being calm looks like. So we can model what being focused looks like, and being compassionate and all those things. It has to first start with the teacher. So I love that.
Totally.
And as you were explaining your story too, I just had this vision of a domino effect where, your training, you started by doing this yoga teacher training, and then each of those teachers took it on in their own way to grow the movement and to share it with the people in their communities. And that is amazing. I love that so much. So thank you for starting this movement. It's so needed.
As educators, with such givers, we give so much of ourselves to others, which is what makes us such beautiful human beings, right?
Yeah.
But it's also when we forget to give that same self-love to ourselves, that's where it catches up with us. But I just wanted to share one of my favorite quotes in the world. from one of my 4-year-olds. His name is Patrick. And one day I was in like teaching pre-K, and I was asking my students, what does community mean to you? And in his adorable Irish accent, he said, well, in a community, first you have to love yourself, because if you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. I wrote it on the wall. I had him say it again to make sure I heard it. But I was like, that is like literally the most brilliant, like the wisest, most brilliant thing I've ever heard anyone say. And that's really what Breathe for Change is all about. And I think what the work that you're doing is all about too. And spoken from a brilliant 4-year-old who knows best. So I just felt like I needed to say that.
That's amazing. I want to be friends with this kid and with this kid's parents, because clearly they're teaching him self-love.
He's in high school now, and I like can't even believe it. I want to go find him and tell him how much of a difference he's made in my life. And yeah,
that's amazing. So I'd love to know, why specifically yoga in the classroom? Why is yoga an important thing? We often get questions at EduComm about, because we're teaching mindfulness and mindful movement. But we have been a little bit careful not to use the words yoga, because that can bring up fear for some people and some parents, because of the word yoga, thinking that it's a religion or something like that. Now, Josiane and I are both also certified yoga teachers.
Amazing.
But we've really kind of gone into the mindfulness aspect because of that. So I'd love to know how you're navigating yoga in the classroom and those questions that are going to come up.
So I love that you mentioned like mindful movement and mindfulness. So we do a ton of work with our teachers within the context of our 200-hour training to talk about how do you utilize inclusive language to ensure that these practices, whether you want to call them yoga or meditation or mindfulness or wellness or community building, there's like, it's all, to me, it's how do we make it accessible to everybody? And so if you're working in a community where, like you had mentioned in the example, there are parents that may be resistant to the idea of yoga, then I would absolutely think about how can I draw them in, talking about like the research behind mindfulness or breath work or like focus strategies. I wouldn't use the word yoga. And what we do is we create so much opportunity for our teachers to really grapple with how can I make these practices inclusive, accessible, and culturally relevant for my community? And that will look so different for every single teacher in that space. And so there is absolutely no script to this. You have to know your community and then consider like, what is something that would allow them to connect to wellness, connect to mindfulness, connect to these practices that research shows have a huge benefit on our lives, on our health, on the way we see the world and experience the world. And so I often get the question or the assumption comes my way, oh, so you're a yoga company. And I say, no. Like that is one aspect, that is one part of what we are. But yoga is also like, there's always an assumption that yoga is like asana. It's the physical practice. It's the downward facing dog or the warrior two. But yoga is so much bigger than that. As you know, as a yoga teacher yourself, it's a way of living and being and connecting to your best self. And so when I think about how can I make the practice of yoga accessible, I'm thinking about how do I help people tap into the part of themselves that is so aligned with who they want to be. And to me, that's yoga. And there's so many different practices that we can bring into teachers' lives, into the classroom, that can have them living and breathing the practice of yoga without necessarily doing a downward facing dog.
Yeah.
Or using words or language that makes people feel excluded. So
Yeah.
I'm constantly thinking about inclusive language and also making sure that we're honoring the lineage of the practice and where it comes from. And so when we do, integrate yoga into the classroom, also, explaining the history and making sure that we're not culturally appropriating these practices that are so powerful and that come from, such deep rooted roots.
I love that. So it sounds like in your training, you're doing a really good job at educating your teachers about how to look at yoga, that it's not just the physical practice, but it's so much more. It's the philosophical side. It's it's the breath work. It's the tuning into the body. It's the presence, which is very similar to mindfulness. It's that presence awareness.
Totally.
So I've heard you speak about wellness as a vehicle for social change. And I just really want to have you tell our audience your views on that and what you mean by that.
It's like my favorite phrase to use.
It's so beautiful.
It so lands with my soul. To me, I think, when I think about the word wellness in and of itself, to me, it's about well-being. It's about how it's going to look different again for you, for me, for everybody. But the reason I chose to say not just, we're an organization that stands for wellness, but wellness as a vehicle for social change is because when we look at the disparities that exist in education and how some students and communities are set up for success while others are left behind with very limited resources, and you look at who has access to wellness, it's usually people who are wealthier, who are usually, more white, upper middle class people have access to wellness and yoga and these practices because they're expensive in our Western society. And so my whole intention is really to have wellness be a vehicle for social change. But what I mean by that is to make it accessible, inclusive, and culturally relevant to those who typically don't have access. And so that our entire schools and communities can transform and thrive together. And I really believe that these practices are a vehicle that will allow so much of the challenges that we're facing as a society to, for us as a society to overcome some of those challenges. And they're tools that individuals can use to cope and deal with some of the stresses and the traumas and the challenges that we're facing in our times today. So that's, I think about it really, to me, it is social change. And it's there's so many, that word gets thrown around, but when we think about it as like, wellness, it's, to me, that just lands so wholeheartedly.
I love that. And it circles right back to that. If we want to create a strong community, we have to create strong individuals that are in tune with themselves, in tune with how they're feeling, in tune with how they're showing up for their peers in their classrooms, how they're contributing to the culture of their classroom and then the culture of the school, and how they're going to plan to contribute to the world. And when they can take that time to connect with themselves and their own values, it really helps them to figure out what are they going to do in this changing world once it's their turn to do something to change the world, right? Once they're of the age that they take over. And having these practices in the classroom is, I think, going to lead to stronger communities for sure and a stronger world.
Totally. I mean, and I see it like we have thousands of grads. I get emails, texts, phone calls, like every single day, hearing story after story about what's unfolding in their classrooms. And, people have like peace corners and their students are learning the peace process, which is one of our SELF strategies, where they can like share their feelings and what their needs are and make requests to each other, and how like students who have had such, or teachers who have had such challenges with creating a community among their students because of, tensions that are unfolding. Now students are running up to them, we solved our problem, and they're co-creating their community culture together and using breathing techniques. And, I've had teachers in the beginning feel like I can't do this. Like, I don't know if my kids are going to be into this mindfulness thing. They're screaming in the class. They're laughing. Like, and I said, don't give up. You have to be consistent with this. And I promise, if you keep going and you do this every single day, I just want you to watch what unfolds. I'm not even going to tell you.
Yeah.
But I had one middle school teacher who started his class with like a mindful moment, and kids were screaming, laughing, throwing things. And he kept doing it every day. By the end of the year, they were sitting in mindful silence for 11 minutes. They would time themselves 11 minutes, and the kids would lead it. So a different kid would come up every day and lead it. And his scores were like at least 10% higher than any other classroom in the entire school. And so it's not like these social emotional learning is a separate subject than history, math, literacy. Like, that's the first myth that I always want to debunk, because it is something that can be interwoven and integrated into everything teachers do and who they are and who our kids are. And so how can you have teachers like before a test, for example, guide their students through a visualization where the kids see themselves being successful on the test? What does that do for your mental capacity when you're going into that test? How does that shift your anxiety into a state of presence, calmness, and confidence? And like, when we do these practices and weave them into all that we do, everything changes for the better. And so
I could not agree more on every single point that you just made. We are sticklers. We say it over and over and over again that this is about creating a routine of practice, about doing it every single day, and that no, you're not going to see the shifts overnight. We have some teachers that use our program that will say, oh my gosh, after the first day, the kids loved it. But then we have some teachers that it takes months, and they're like, I never thought my kids would be able to do it. But now, 2 months in, oh my gosh, they are sitting through the whole 5-minute guided mindfulness practice, and I'm seeing huge shifts in them. And some that it might take the whole year before they realize how far the kids have come. And
totally.
It can't, like you said, it can't just be something, social emotional learning can't be something that's taught like a lesson. I mean, it can be, of course, we can explicitly teach it, but it has to be modeled. It has to be lived. And I think that by teaching yoga and mindfulness in the classroom, we're giving students the tools and the outlooks and the mindsets, to be able to live that social emotional development in their day to day. And like you said, like it goes into when they're taking the test, their emotions don't go away when you're doing academics. In fact, they're so important.
And we're really seeing the ripple effect happening well beyond just the classroom. Like, because Breathe for Change has grown so much over the years, we have principals that take our training, superintendents who are taking our training, school social workers, psychologists, education nonprofit leaders. And so in addition to obviously our early childhood educators, K through 12 teachers and professors and everything on the spectrum. But one of the things that's blown me away is seeing the school-wide transformation that happens. Like, when the administrator is on board and sees the value, especially when they graduate from our training. Like, we have schools that now are, our certified Breathe for Change schools, and they have a whole mindfulness room They start every single day over the intercom or in assemblies doing like breathing techniques and mindfulness and community building exercises. And it is a part of every single classroom culture. And what ends up happening then is that it definitely builds that homeschool connection because the kids go home, parents come back. This happened in my own classroom. They're like, when I was yelling at my child last night, he told me to take 3 collective breaths. And I was like, what is going on in school? And then I'm like, oh my God, the parents are like, I needed that. And then, then we're doing family nights and other things. So you just see that starting with one teacher or one administrator, the ripple effects are huge, especially when you have a whole school community involved and when people within that community have other communities. And then that's really how like the ripple effect happens. That is, you or I could never even truly put a number on that or a measurement because it's through every interaction that it's making a difference.
It's amazing. We are seeing similar things. Just that ripple effect that's what gets me so excited. Like when you just told that story, I have goosebumps because I'm like, what is this next generation going to look like if we keep infusing these practices into our classrooms as this ripple continues? I'm just so excited to see where the world is going to go with these young kids that are growing up in this type of environment and learning these practices. Oh, it's so encouraging and it's inspiring.
So good.
So I am just so excited about everything that you're doing. I think our listeners are going to be so excited, and I'm sure there are going to be a few that are going to want to sign up for your yoga teacher training.
Yay!
I'd like to just speak a little bit on, or for you to speak a little bit on, the deep impact that a yoga teacher training specifically has on, learning it for yourself first. So let's say that we have someone that's maybe just dipping their toes into yoga, they're enjoying it, or even someone that has a pretty regular yoga practice. What does a yoga teacher training do for them?
It transforms your soul from the inside out. So, I liked the way that you led into that because in our trainings, we get people who have like literally never practiced yoga before, all the way to people who have a, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year practice and everything in between. What a yoga teacher training does is it allows you to look so deeply at who you are and who you want to become, and allows you to see the obstacles in the way of you fulfilling your intentions, and allows you to truly create a connection to yourself and to the world around you. And at least in our training, curriculum and instruction is my passion. So we have this transformational curricular progression, which is very connected to everything that we've been talking about already. So we have like 3 layers of transformation. It starts with transformation of self, where we invite educators to focus on their own well-being and what are their intentions for themselves and their well-being, and how can they start prioritizing self-care in a way that fills their cups so they can do everything that they're here to do in this world. And then from that foundation of well-being for themselves, we move into transformation of relationships, which is all about how can we enhance well-being in our relationships and show it fully in all of our relationships. And then from there, we move into transformation of community, which is really why educators come to our yoga teacher training in the first place, which helps us, explore the question, like, how can I use wellness, social emotional learning, and yoga as vehicles for social change within my community and really enhance collective well-being in my community. And then from there, we always end our trainings with this emphasis on what we call integration and renewal, because we want to remind ourselves that it is so important to like go through this integrative process and return back to ourselves so that we can prepare ourselves for this new beginning. And I think that that is our approach. in our yoga teacher training, but I think it really gets at the essence of the power of yoga, which is truly just putting a mirror up to yourself and saying, like, who am I? Who do I want to become? And how can I get there? And learn to let go of the things that aren't serving us and align our inner and outer worlds. And so it's a deep, deep transformational journey. And I know that when I did my yoga teacher training, I didn't go in at all thinking I wanted to be a yoga teacher. It was not my intention. I was in a really dark place. I would go to my mat every day and cry in child's pose. And it was like the only place that felt sacred to me where I could just let it go. And so I went because I needed to heal myself. And then a year later, and it was life-changing, just like it is for pretty much everyone who goes through it. And a year later, when I called my yoga teacher who had trained me, and I said, I'm starting Breathe for Change. I don't even think I had that name yet. I was like, I'm starting the world's only 200-hour wellness and yoga teacher training. Help me. And she said, I have been waiting for this call ever since you graduated from my training. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you would not stop talking about how teachers and students needed access to this practice. And I didn't remember it because I was going through my transformational journey, as you know yourself.
Yep.
So, I think for anyone who is even remotely interested or like, what is yoga? Like, why would I practice yoga? I think the question that I would pose is like, what matters to you and how can you draw on this practice as a way to support you in fulfilling that purpose?
That's amazing. Josiane and I both had such transformational practices, and very similar to your story, we did our yoga teacher trainings, and one thing led to the other. We shared yoga in our classrooms with our students, saw the big transformations in them, and then went, how do we share this with the world? How do we make this accessible? So totally. I love that you and Josiane and I have gone at this, tackling this issue or this thing that we want to bring to the world in different ways, but that it's all with the same intention and the same purpose and trying to solve the same problem of teachers being stressed and overwhelmed and knowing that in order for them to best serve their students, they have to first serve themselves. And then once they're serving themselves, wow, the change that we're going to be able to make in the world is just incredible and exciting.
Massive.
Yeah.
I love it. It is so amazing to know that the two of you are doing this work and that there's so many other amazing leaders around the country and world also committed to enhancing teacher well-being and student well-being and recognizing the critical connection between teacher well-being and student learning, which is what my PhD research truly revealed and what's revealing itself more and more every single day. So I'm so grateful for you and that you're doing this podcast and the work that you're doing for teachers everywhere. So we're on the same team and I love it.
Oh, thank you so much. So for our teachers that are going to want to definitely look into Breathe for Change, where's the best way for them to find more information?
Well, teachers, I can't wait to meet all of you. You can go to our website, which is breatheforchange.com, and you can access our 200-hour trainings there. We also lead workshops in a bunch of areas all over the United States, but hopefully we'll be coming to Canada soon. And we lead professional developments in schools, districts, and organizations, so you can access all of that online. And one of the new initiatives that we have is we have what we call our Changemaker program. And so we give out free self-care and social emotional learning resources like lesson plans and videos and guided meditations and more and more and more content each month that's aligned with our Breathe for Change themes. So September was Breathe for Beginnings, October was Breathe for Creativity, this month is Breathe for Gratitude. So we have different themes. And then I also lead free professional development webinars each month to support you in bringing those resources to life in your classroom in your community and just for you. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can get involved, whether or not the 200 hour is your first step. Amazing if it is, but we want to make sure that we're accessible to everybody. So please sign up for our Changemaker program and go to our website. You can also access us on our Facebook page, Breathe for Change, Instagram handle, Breathe with a 4, number 4, change. And we're on LinkedIn, and you can pretty much find us everywhere. So
awesome. We'll put all of those links in our
excited.
show notes too. So for those of you listening, don't worry. We'll have all those links there for you on educalm.com. So
amazing. And a particular shout out to anyone in the Bay Area, Chicago, New York, or Boston areas. We have 200-hour spring trainings coming up that are starting in January. It'll be every other weekend, January through May. And then we also have those cities plus LA, Denver, Austin, Madison, DC, and I'm forgetting one. It'll come to me. Seattle in the summer of 2020. So they're filling up pretty quickly. So if you're interested, then definitely check it out and fill out that interest form so that we can talk to you and see if it feels like a good fit.
Awesome. Thank you so much for connecting with our community. And I'm sure we will talk again very soon.
Totally. In this for life. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. This was so amazing, and I'm eternally grateful.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Ilana's story and learning about Breathe for Change as much as I did. Thank you, Ilana, so much for being on the show. Ilana was also kind enough to write a whole blog post for our EduComm community, so you can check out her blog post, which includes more information about Breathe for Change and her 200-hour yoga teacher training for teachers at educalm.com/TBE088. So that's EduCalm, spelled EduCalme.com/TBE, as in the Balanced Educator, 088. If you are listening to the show for the first time because you're a Breathe for Change community member and you came to hear Ilana chat with us today, welcome. We're so happy to have you here, and we invite you back next week. We have episodes coming out every Monday to help teachers feel more calm, balanced, and joyful both in and out of the classroom. We also invite you to check out our free mindfulness resources. You can go find those at educalm.com and click on free trial to sign up. Now, when you click on free trial and sign up, you're going to get a whole month's worth of mindfulness audios that are created by teachers for the classroom. You're also going to get some lesson plans, printables, and other great things to help you integrate mindfulness daily in your classroom with your students. Now, if you enjoy the free trial, which by the way never ends, so you have access to it unlimited forever, for as long as you want it. If you really enjoy it, then you can sign up for our full year mindfulness program called EduCalm Classroom. So in this program, you're going to get a full year of guided mindfulness audios, lesson plans, and printables to use in your classroom every day. So by the end of the year, your students will have really integrated these social emotional learning skills, and they will be better equipped to navigate life's challenges in a mindful way. So again, you can find all of these resources on our website at educalm.com. That's spelled EduCalme. Thank you so much for being here with us this week. We look forward to chatting with you again next week.